Hello, 2019 is here. Like all new beginnings or new year beginnings, this is a time where we set ideas or we set targets that we want to accomplish by the end of the year. Well, here we committed to sharing with you ideas anchored on real people doing real business, on how they've made it and how you can borrow a leaf to actually make it from wherever you sit. I'm Charles Boyd, your host. This is Money and Markets. Coming up on Money and Markets. Development partners in this country support many initiatives. Some are purely social transformational initiatives, while others are business-oriented initiatives. One of the development partners is quite strong-footed in this particular space. We hear his story. Francis, it's nice to have you on the show, Money and Markets. Now, give us an overview of FBI's support to the coffee subsector.
Thank you very much. To give you a glimpse into how we intervene in the coffee subsector, you need to get a background of the objectives of FBI. And the objective basically is to intervene in the agriculture sector through agribusiness, and the drivers are mainly through the private sector. At the inception of ABI in 2010, they did a value chain analysis of various crops and commodities in Uganda, or what we call value chains. And they looked at value chains in terms of the ones which had impact in terms of income to the farmers and producers, the ones which had an impact in terms of value addition, the ones which had impact in terms of creating employment, and the ones which had what we call a social impact, the ones which are the level of inclusiveness for what we call groups like women, youth, how inclusive it is in terms of those value chains. So eventually when they did that value chain analysis, coffee became one of the key drivers. Now, you will also realize that our approach in terms of agribusiness, we've been, basically our aim, our objective is the Ugandan producer, the farmer. So our approach in agribusiness is that we start from the market. We don't start from the farmer, we start from the end market. And said, what are the imperfections? What are the constraints that we have in the coffee market? Now we assess that and then we work backwards. And then all of a sudden, when you do that, you realize that there are people who act along the chain and the people who are able to influence the coffee production process along the chain. When we did that, we found that for farmers to be effective, they need to have access to the market. And you can know that access to the coffee market is mainly done by exporters in Uganda. And the exporters are companies, they're either foreign or local companies. So we realized that for us to work with the farmers effectively, there is no way you could work with the farmers without involving these companies who are exporters. So that's how we came up. So we identified key agribusinesses, SMEs, who are working in coffee. And you know the way we approach them is that we go out for a call for proposals. We put in the papers and said, for the coffee subsector, for example, we are going to do an intervention and we are looking for companies who can apply to us.
How do you think this support will help Uganda attain the 20 million bags target that has been set by government?
The 20 million bag strategy actually is hinged on two areas. One is increasing production. That is area you planting more coffee trees. And the other one is increasing productivity. Productivity is getting more output from the already existing coffee trees. And I think this is where we as ABI, we are very good at. We help the agribusinesses who work with their farmers, mainly to improve issues of productivity. They give them new technologies, they give them agro inputs, they set up demos for learning, and they do a lot of extension and teaching of these farmers, to increase their production. So we have already had cases. You have gone to Mount Elgon, you have got individual farmers who have doubled individual production per tree from maybe like 0.5, they are getting over a kilogram. And we believe that will have the immediate impact in increasing the volumes for the 20 million bag strategy.
On the ground, several beneficiaries that you've helped are happy with your support. Going forward, which areas would you want to touch and why?
Okay. There are many areas we want to touch, but we restrict ourselves to 6 value chains. Other than, after I've already mentioned coffee. The other 5 is we also do intervene in dairy. We intervene in horticulture. We intervene in pulses. Pulses are mainly beans. And we also intervene in oil seeds. That's sunflower, soya. So those are other five value chains. In total, we have 6 value chains. And we give them this almost the same intervention, although the percentage in terms of funding, coffee still takes the highest percentage. Now, the reason why we do this is we try to cater for the different ecological zones of Uganda. You will find, for example, that coffee is strong in central region and parts of the highland areas of southwestern Uganda, northwestern and eastern. But then you have areas like south mid the Kata corridor. How would you intervene there? That's why we have there. That caters for parts of central Uganda and parts of mainly southwestern Uganda. Then we have the whole of northern Uganda, which is very good in citrus fruits and beans, chilies. In terms of horticulture, they do very well, and oilseeds and sunflower. So if you look at the 6 value chains that we have, it actually takes over the whole country. The other one I didn't mention, by the way, is cereals. That is our second flagship at the moment, is cereals.
If you to ask the different groups that you've supported to complement your effort, that is government, the private sector, farmers and communities, what would this be?
Thank you very much. I think the key stakeholders in our interventions really are the producers, the farmers, and I told you the agribusiness, and of course the last one is government, as you know. One is we will still want the government to help us in creating the necessary environment for doing business. There are some value chains which really need a lot of government support, like horticulture, for example. We're not doing very well in it because, one, there is still a need for a lot of infrastructure to be developed for some of the areas where this horticulture is, and then the market up to the export level is not well organized. It needs a very good regulatory framework. We will work with the government on that. For the agribusinesses, what we would want them to do is to become ethical. We still have issues in Uganda. When you are working with these businesses, there is an issue of governance. Or governance that when you get a coin, when you get 1 shilling from ABI, what do you do with that money? Are you able to account it? Do you divert it? We want them to grow their business and also show transparency in the businesses. And the other thing we would want them, which is also common now, is that we want them to practice what we call all-inclusive employment. Cater for women, cater for youth in their businesses. These are, we call them social responsible, you call them socially responsible initiatives, or SRIs. And we want them to adapt them in their business. That some of these socially acceptable norms, they may not necessarily bring business into you, but they become best practices. That's what we want them to do. That for every coin that you use, please use it to make it inclusive, but also ensure that you grow the business. Now, and also don't divert the funds. You know, donor money is coming, but donor money will not be there forever. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Francis.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, nice talking to you.
Pleasure. With Uganda's debt to GDP ratio threatening to hit the unacceptable threshold, there are many questions lingering. Many have already started asking questions why the country continues to borrow out when there are resources domestically that can be mobilized to support that. We explore this school of thought and find out whether it has some potency in it. The scarcity of long-term financing in the economy is oftentimes cited as a major hindrance to government aspiration of developing long-term projects like infrastructure using domestic resources. As a result, the country has had to rely on borrowed resources from foreign governments and multilateral lenders to finance most of these projects, such as roads and dams. This at times breeds its own challenges, such as less prudent conditions set by the foreign funders. But experts contend that there are more long-term resources domestically and the region that government can utilize.
I recently read a report, I think it was the African Development Bank, that said that in East Africa alone there was about $26 billion of latent capital available. That which is not deployed, underdeployed, or if it's deployed, it's inefficiently. So there is domestic capital.
One of the areas being cited is the pension sector, with the National Social Security Fund alone sitting on an over 9 trillion shillings kitty. This, plus the resources controlled by the private social security service providers, can help plug the long-term financing gap.
If we can do some reforms in the NSSF law, If we can do some reforms like establishing a contributory scheme, then we broaden the base for long-term finance.
But that gets into the argument about pension deregulation, because if I'm 20 years old and I'm going to retire in 30 or 40 years' time, that capital that is being managed by pension funds is going to last 40 years. So you can match infrastructure on the other side of my capital to enhance the pool of long-term funding.
But what is needed to mobilize more long-term resources and free them for investment?
The capital markets in itself is a transparent frame within which you can deploy capital over the long term. I don't think we're using it well enough. If we enhance the products that sit there, there'll certainly be the right amount of capital domestically to match government infrastructure spending.
Another area of interest, according to pundits, is the tax. With Uganda's tax to GDP ratio ranked behind that of its peers, Kenya and Tanzania, this area, according to pundits, has great potential fast-tracking the reduction of the country's dependence on donor debt and aid to build key infrastructure.
We see that between the period 1996 and 2006, the tax revenues or the revenues were responding very well to the economic developments at 1.24%. And a ratio above 1 is pretty good. However, in the last 10 years, that is 2006 to about 2016, we found that this ratio deteriorated to 0.95%, meaning that if the economy grew by 1%, the revenues do not grow in tandem to the economic development. There's something that happens which makes us not catch that extra economic development in the revenue base.
And some of the reasons for this state of affairs are not far if one looked keenly.
Part of the problem, Maurice, that we have in this country is that government is informal. Government is informal in this economy. They are not meeting their tax obligations. We are paying our pay as you earn, and if you don't pay as you earn, if you don't pay as you earn, as a private entity, you are able to wake up and come to you and put the padlocks, isn't it? But I am waiting for that day when URA wakes up with all the padlocks and goes to a ministry because they have not remitted their pay as you earn. They don't remit pay as you earn. They deduct but do not remit.
Between the good pension sector reforms and policies and an efficient tax administration system lies, according to pundits, a solution to rolling back the ballooning foreign aid and the country's reliance on aid to support key sectors. Even here, though, effective resource utilization remains paramount. Well, that story concludes our first segment on Money and Markets today. Don't go away. We still have more for you.